So it's online. It's on. Okay. Hey, everyone. How you doing? Sorry if I look terrible. I ran in from the rain, literally. So I'm still kind of sopped to the bone in this lovely post-holiday apocalypse that we live in here. But anyway, besides that, we're getting a late start on today's show, but for good reason. We had a couple things going on. We had the Team Canada game, of course, today, right? And we want to talk about that. And then also Kevin Allen's masterful idea. This is good. So explain what's going on, Kev.
Well, USA Today basically in conjunction with or in celebration of the Winter Classic featuring the original 6 teams of the Boston Bruins and the Montreal Canadiens decided to look at sort of the old What If comic book series. What if we still only had 6 teams? So we picked 6 general managers, and we basically redrafted the NHL. And we looked at the 66-67 standings, and we then, the last time there was the original 6, and then we drafted in reverse order, and we allowed the teams to pick their coaches, and the Bruins took Darryl Sutter, the Blackhawks took Joel Quenneville, the Red Wings took Dave Tippett, the Canadiens took Mike Babcock, the Maple Leafs took Claude Julien, and the Rangers took Alain Vigneault. And then the GMs that we picked were, you couldn't be someone who was employed by the team because we felt like they would feel obligated to take their own guy. So we took former coach and general manager Doug McClain, coached the Red Wings, former player and agent Tom Laidlaw did the Rangers, former Rangers Stanley Cup winning general manager Neil Smith did the Toronto Maple Leafs, which was his hometown team. Pierre Maguire, who grew up in Montreal, picked for the Montreal Canadiens. Craig Button picked for the Boston Bruins. And who am I missing? Eddie Olczyk picked, former coach and player, picked for the Chicago Blackhawks.
This is great, and this is great stuff. Now, the actual article comes out when?
Well, it'll be in tomorrow's paper, but pretty much everything is online already. And then tomorrow we're going to sort of further analyze the teams, and then we're hoping through Eklund's computerized magic to have a simulation of the season. So
we're going to do that. We're going to have a simulation of the season. We'll have stats. We'll have everything. So it's going to be fun.
I've sent them the teams, and I guess there's been quite a bit. It was really a fascinating adventure. We've already Russ has just brought up, like, I really admired how diligent everyone was about trying to pick a good team. But what's interesting is, just in real life, these guys pick these teams based on their own individual philosophy. Like Tom Laidlaw picked for the Rangers. They do not have a single defenseman under 6'3".
Wow.
Not a single defenseman. Mark Seabrook is the smallest of the shortest at 6'3". Wow. 220 pounds. And, they have Shane
Laidlaw's not even 6'3". That's the funny part.
Pardon me?
Laidlaw is not even 6'3".
No, but, the game was a little bit different when he played. But, obviously the players, Eddie Olczyk said after we were done, wow, that Ranger team is a big team. They really are. They're a giant team. And Neil Smith picked a Maple Leafs team that I really like this Maple Leafs team because it'll be pretty good this season, but it's really going to be good in 3 or 4 years when, took Draisaitl. I mean, Draisaitl is their fourth line center.
Yeah, I think they're a little short on goaltending there, Kevin, with Braden Holtby and Pekka Rinne.
Yeah. They're really short, and it's funny because initially Neil, when he was talking about what he was going to do, wasn't sure he was going to take a premium goalie. It wasn't real early; it was late in the draft, but he decided to because he said, if I was really in this position, I would really want, in case Holtby went down.
Yeah.
But to me, the real magic was the Red Wings taking with their first 3 picks, Connor McDavid number 1, number 2 pick overall, John Tavares with their 2nd round pick, Sidney Crosby 12th overall, 3rd round pick, and then with their 4th pick, Erik Karlsson. And then, which is one of my favorite moments in the draft, Doug McLean took Steven Stamkos in the 5th round and said, "And I'm putting him on the wing." But I don't think Steven will mind.
I think we'd be okay with that line.
Yeah, if your centers are either Tavares or Crosby or Connor McDavid, I think you're happy to play the wing. So it's good.
I had 2 problems with GM Laidlaw though.
Let's start there. By the way, today is December 29th, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
I'm Eklund, and you're watching HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every afternoon, and we are doing a show today, late in the early evening, because we're covering this really fun draft we're just following.
It's 1 p.m. in Hawaii.
Is 1 p.m. So it's in Florida. It's only 1:30, 1:40. California. So it's not too bad. We're okay. So we're covering the Kevin Allen in USA Today did a great draft. Redrafting the original 6 teams were they available to all the players today. So this is the modern original 6 teams, and this basically the talk is always how much better the NHL would be if we only had 6 teams, because they would have to be narrowed down. All the players would have to be narrowed down, and of course that is the case. Whenever you narrow down 30 teams to 6 teams, you're going to have 6 better teams than you would otherwise. But there's a whole lot of other philosophical aspects to that question. But we wouldn't have all these NHL players if we only had 6 teams as well. So as it plays out, this is really fascinating. So now we're going to get right into the little bit we've been discussing in the pre-show, but also now Russ has some problems with Thomas Laidlaw, who made some picks in the beginning here, somewhat controversial. Tom Laidlaw, who is in your book of 100 Greatest Rangers.
Yes, he is. And I like Tom. I liked his wallet back in the day. Yeah. I had no problem with Tom the person, but as the GM.
Tom,
fire away.
Go ahead. Let's see. So what do you have, Russ? What do you got?
So, the Kovalchuk pick in the 18th round, he might as well just take Tushimoto. Like, he might as well just make up a name and just put him in there, because even though the Russian ruble has gotten weaker, Kovalchuk's like on the most wealthy team there, and they're getting all kinds of players again. So I'm not sure he's going anywhere. So, he wasted a pick. He absolutely.
Last Olympics, Kovalchuk was very good still. I mean, he looked.
But if he comes over at the age of 39, it'll be like, well, what's he going to do? He wasted a pick there. That's one. And then he picked Mark Stahl in the 13th round, who's having a horrible year. Terrible year. And Kevin Klein he got in the 21st round, and Klein is actually ranked in the top 10 defensemen. He lucked out there. I got to tell you, that's some of the other GMs just didn't jump on Kevin Klein, but that was a break for Laidlaw. But, those are my 2 issues with him.
Well, there are a lot of Rangers, Kevin. Go ahead. There are a lot of Rangers on Laidlaw's team for sure.
Yeah, well, and he likes Stahl as a guy that he thinks. It's funny. The GMs actually, like when McLean took Crosby, said, "I'll get him playing." He actually said that as if he was going to be able to talk him into it. And Laidlaw feels he'll empower Stahl. He'll get him going again, and he'll have him playing, well. Like, he thought Bouwmeester and Stahl were guys that he felt could, really kind of play the type of game that he wants to play, especially when, there's not a lot of pressure on him because he has Hedman and Weber that will carry the mail.
Right.
So he was pretty pleased with that. And Kovalchuk, he just thought it was a good roll of the dice. It was late in the he had
that late, the 18th round. He could have rolled it like in the 20-something round.
Well, yeah, and I don't have the 18th round in front of me. I can't remember who was going there.
Hold on.
He made a lot more work for me because I got to create a Kovalchuk player. I just realized now because he's not.
Oh, you can't create a Kovalchuk player because he's not in the NHL.
No. He's on that. He's on a Russian team that I have. That's perfectly fine. I can do it on my computer. Yeah, I was trying to.
Here's who went in the 18th round: James Neal to the Bruins, Craig Anderson to the Red Wings, Kovalchuk to the Rangers, Zuccarello to the Leafs. That would have been a better pick than Kovalchuk, Mr. Laidlaw.
Well, he couldn't have taken James, and Neal's a big guy too. He's not a,
Henrique to the Canadiens and Ryan Kessler. Any of those picks would have been better than Kovalchuk.
Yeah, Kessler in particular, you would like so.
I see what Neil Smith did with the Leafs, and I like some of it. But right off the top, if it's a choice between Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane in a Canadian market,
all right. So let's start with the first 6 picks just to start there, so we can see where these guys are going, right? Because
first 6 picks were Drew Doughty by the Bruins.
Yeah, the Bruins take Drew Doughty. The Red Wings took Connor McDavid second overall.
Right.
And this is moving forward. This was done not just for 1 year, Kevin, right? But the idea was you're building a team.
Right. The charge was you're building a team that should be competitive right now, but also should be good in 3, 4, and 5 years.
I think you should do this every year. We should have trades. We should keep moving on. That'd be really fun. Henrik Lundqvist, third to the Rangers. Patrick Kane goes fourth to the Maple Leafs. Fifth, is the Canadians grab Carey Price, which all the Canadians fans will be thrilled about. A healthy Carey Price, by the way. And number 6 will be Jonathan Toews to the Blackhawks. So, Mike, now go ahead.
And by the way, before he does that, I want to tell you that Eddie Olczyk said at the 6th pick, I was surprised Toews was still there.
Right, and that's my point. In a Canadian market, and that has to be factored in, if it's a choice between Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, I think they're taking Jonathan Toews. I think Jonathan Toews is the more complete player. I'm not saying Patrick Kane isn't great, because he is great, but if it's the Leafs, they're taking a Canadian player, and I think it should have been Toews. The other thing I look down up and down the roster, it's very center centric. I mean, he drafted a lot of centers, which yes, you can move them to the wing, but Duchesne and Duchesne's been moved to the wing in the NHL, but Duchesne, Pavelski, Backstrom, Eichel, Larkin, Draisaitl's playing the wing, but he's probably going to be a center. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, they're not very strong on the wing, or they're going to have a lot of players playing out of position playing the wing. And I think that's a weakness. I personally would have flip-flopped Toews and Kane, and then in the round that Stamkos was taken, I probably would have taken Stamkos ahead of him.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fair. I mean, you can make the case. I personally don't think that the Toronto Maple Leafs have to worry about the nationality of their player. I think. You worry about those kind of things when you're a market trying to sell tickets, and we're not doing that in Toronto. So, but I mean, I think you can just make a case that Toews is a better all-around, and he's a leader, and all that stuff. I'm sure the way that Neil looked at it, he didn't say, but is that Kane is having a spectacular year, and he's probably entering the best season of his career, while Toews' numbers have been not as spectacular this season, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mike to a degree on this one because of the fact. I mean, it's not just Jonathan Toews. This is like Captain Canada, right? This is not just. This is the epitome of the Canadian. I mean, so many Canadian hockey player, and when you draw a Canadian hockey player, he is Jonathan Toews. That's what everybody says. That he was the guy that many people always say they'll start a team with if they can start a team with anybody. Is Jonathan Toews.
I would argue that maybe a year ago he might have been the first overall pick. And I say all the time in a joking fashion to USA Hockey, if there was one guy that the Americans should want or be envious of, it's Jonathan Toews. Like, to me, he's almost like they called Nicholas Lidstrom the perfect human. Toews is pretty close. Does the right thing.
Yep.
He's a good player. He's a great leader. He does the right things. He's a likable guy. He's a smart guy. He embraces the right causes. He's a good marketing guy. So, I mean, I understand that. I don't think you could go wrong with Toews or Kane, but I agree with Mike. I probably would have taken Toews there.
I see a bad pick for GM Olczyk, too. I do.
Okay.
Go ahead.
In the 4th round, in the 3rd round, he took Roman Josi with Erik Karlsson on the board. I don't know how you do that.
I think he thought he's a better all-around player than Karlsson.
Yeah, but you know what? The funny thing is like in today's NHL, Roman Josi is a better all-around player, but if you could get Erik Karlsson, that changes your whole team. Like, there's no way I could ever pick him ahead of him.
Yeah, I can see that, but,
No, I mean, there's really some awesome debates throughout this thing. I mean, it's just...
Two things that are interesting here, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm scanning the list, and I don't see Phil Kessel taken.
He was not taken. He was on the list of 15 people who, are surprising we're not there. Tuukka Rask is not on there as well.
And this is the funny thing. Tuukka Rask has not been picked, but a backup goaltender who has been in the league for in the AHL for half the season, Andrei Vasilevsky, was taken.
And Ben Bishop was not taken.
Yeah, and Craig Anderson too. So there's some favorites being played there, I think.
Yeah, well, Vasilevsky, it's interesting. I actually put the explanation on there. Laidlaw was a color analyst for the KHL's English broadcast. And so he saw Vasilevsky in a playoff series and thought he was the most spectacular young goalie he'd ever seen. And he's been following his career and has been talking to people, and he believes strongly that Vasilevsky will supplant Bishop in a very short period of time. So
I do too, but how about Craig Anderson? It's hard to say that one over Tuukka Rask.
I said in the analysis that I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Luongo will be the Red Wings starting goalie and not Anderson even. So.
Right.
But Anderson's numbers, I looked it up. I wrote them in there. Like, if you look from level of consistency, like Anderson has really been like Mr. Consistency through his career. Now, saying that, I don't disagree with you. I would have taken other goalies.
You need to go with a goalie who's going to be able to face this kind of power. I mean, whoever you're playing against is going to be throwing a lot of power at you. You know,
Right.
That's where I go with Luongo too. I mean, I think Luongo is just a stronger goalie and a bigger goalie in situations like this. You know, like he's gonna be facing up against some really there's no weak games. Anderson's a great goalie in many situations, but I wouldn't put him. I wouldn't. There's a reason I think the U.S. have kept him off the Olympic team, for example. This is sort of the same kind of thing.
And never really been strongly considered. Like, I mean, he's been in the mix, but I don't remember him ever being like right on the cusp. Like if I said to this group, basically what we're talking about is the top 12 goalies in the league. Right. Would any of you have Anderson on that list? No. Probably not.
No.
And we're talking about, out of an NHL of 690 players, whatever, 30 times 20.
It's actually 841 who have played an NHL game.
Okay. How does Vladimir Sobotka get picked?
Well, because you're putting together a team. To me, that made perfect sense. Like, everybody had Sobotka on their list because you're competing. You want guys with an edge, and you know how he is. He's and you're trying to have guys that energy guys. I mean, you can't have an all-star, team. So that's why. But there were guys down at the bottom. It was funny because I was talking to everybody. Like, everybody had the same guys.
Finish off their rosters. Wow.
Yeah, because they were all looking for the same type of guy. They were looking for grittier guys. They were looking for, like everybody in the Final Four. Everybody was considering Andrew Ladd. Just because he's won, he's got a little bit of an edge to him. He can play that fourth line role, and that's the other thing that I admired about Neil Smith's team. We have they actually gave us the way they would play their lines and stuff, and his fourth line is Larkin, Draisaitl, and Hoffman. Like, he's not bothering with the checking line, okay?
Right.
And you know how I feel about that. So we've had this conversation before.
No, that's
I'm surprised Neil didn't try to draft Austin Matthews early. That's sort of Neil's style.
Well, the Red Wings, on the other hand, Simmons, Monahan, and Stone. So they have a little grit there. The Rangers, he's got big grittier guys all the way through his life. I mean, he loved Carter and he took him. He loves O'Reilly. But who doesn't?
McKinnon balances it. That's good.
Yeah, McKinnon's good. I like his offense. I quibbled with him. Speaking of the Rangers, I had trouble with Getzlaf. I think Getzlaf should be on this list because of his body of work and because he's he's the real reason why the Coyotes drafted Dylan Strom, because they were trying to compete, a center that could stand up to Getzlaf. Like, everybody was looking for that, kind of guy. So he's still an important factor, but he hasn't scored any goals in a long time. So, but he's got him centering Hall and McKinnon, which is a pretty good line, and Pacioretty I thought was a steal for the Rangers where he got him. I think there were guys like everything else in the other draft that just sort of fell down. Like, the other thing is Ovechkin too, and I wrote this column. I think we talked about it too, where I just said, when he retires, Ovechkin I'm speaking of, we're all going to say, wow, like, what an incredible goal scorer. But nobody will give him that credit now. Like, slid down even in this draft because he hasn't won, and I mean,
middle of the 4th round for Ovechkin. That's really
for really the greatest scorer of this generation.
Yeah,
and a guy who's 230 pounds
and still playing really well, and still playing top of his game, not having a bad season at all.
No, and drives to the net like a freight train. So.
Yeah, there's some like Claude Giroux taken in the 3rd round right before Sidney Crosby. That's going to surprise a lot of Flyers fans. Out there, and a lot of hockey fans in general. But Sidney Crosby going 13th overall, I guess it is.
Well, was it 13th or 12th? I thought it was 12th.
14th.
14th overall.
Okay, yeah.
14th overall. Yeah, I mean that's pretty. I mean, and this is probably the only year that would ever happen. You would think. Like to me, like I would think that normally, if a normal Crosby year, there's no way he slips out of the 1st round. But
Craig Button got maybe the steal of the draft, 21st round, Jake Muzzin. Like everybody just sort of slept on him. He's been going up and up and up, and Button got a really good pick there.
Yeah, people are really. Muzzin is an interesting character, though. I mean, he's very polarizing when you talk to people about Jake Muzzin.
Well,
I'm not a Muzzin. I'm like on the anti-Muzzin side of things. Like I think he's a bit of a pretender, and I think I don't know. He gets away with a lot of stuff on that you just wouldn't expect. I think he draws a lot of cheap penalties too. So he's kind of one of those guys I'm not a big fan of. I don't know.
Eric Stepan, 23rd round for Craig Button. That's a great pick.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. I mean, and there's some fascinating picks like the Montreal Canadiens getting Patrice Bergeron, and is going to be something that Canadiens fans are going to have a fun time with, and Bruins fans as well, of course, because that's.
Here's what's interesting on that. Okay, so Pierre takes him early, and his logic was he wanted him. He didn't think he'd be available with his next pick, and he's obviously a great defensive forward, the best face-off guy, and he's ranked among leading scorers in the league this season. But still, a lot of people wouldn't take him that high. But when Pierre filled out his depth chart and the way he saw things, he has Bergeron as his number 2 center behind Kopitar.
Wow. Okay.
He took Bergeron ahead of him.
Yeah, but he's the best number 2 center in hockey, and that's
right.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I mean, not to say, and there are a lot of scoring centers that you can slot in a number 1 center role, but a guy like Bergeron who can step up as a number 1 center when needs be, and he will have to do that in real life right now because Krejci is out for, it says, week to week, so he's going to have to step up to the number 1 center. Yeah, I mean, he's an invaluable player. The only thing I worry about him going forward is the wear and tear on him of years of playoff battles. He may drop off a lot sooner than a lot of people think.
And I'll tell you another steal, and this one goes out to Eddie O. Getting Toffoli in the 9th round, that's crazy. Like, how did he even get to the 9th round? He's 23 years old. He's got 17 goals. He's seventh in the league in goals. He just had a hat trick. Like, how does he even get to the 9th round?
Yeah, well, that's 54 players, and you're trying to get defensemen because you're worried that the top ones are going to be gone. That's what ended up happening. Like, there was a little bit of a run on defensemen because there were like 10 or 12 defensemen that everybody wanted. So
this is like a Stratomatic draft.
All right, but here's the thing. All right, Kev, I get that argument.
It is.
But then the Red Wings take Blake Wheeler the round before. There's no way in the world I'm taking Blake Wheeler over Tyler Toffoli any day of the week. There's no way.
Yeah.
Well, how about Ekblad going in the 6th round? I mean, Ekblad in the 6th round is when you consider that Connor McDavid is 2nd overall.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Ekblad making it to the 6th round is pretty surprising as well. I mean, you could argue who's more valuable player. Ekblad is. Would they make an Ekblad for Connor McDavid trade? Ekblad is when you think about how much future this guy has and how rare it is to get a defenseman like that.
One of the big reasons Florida is on the path they're on. I mean, he really is.
Yeah, but that you can't. There's no way the Oilers would trade Connor McDavid for Ekblad.
No, they wouldn't. But what I'm saying, as far as being worth to the team, right now Ekblad is definitely worth more to his franchise and will be probably for another couple of years anyhow.
Yeah, I don't dispute that. I think
yes. I don't think that there's any way they would trade Connor McDavid for Ekblad, Kevin. But I think that we really, if you say that statement is the right thing or not, we have to wait like 3 or 4 years because it's very possible that. I mean, you never know. I mean, Connor McDavid could turn into the next Sidney Crosby or Gretzky, or could turn into just a really good scoring center. And Ekblad is still a giant defenseman who can score and move the puck no matter how you slice it. That's what Ekblad is, right? So the certainty is there with Ekblad over most. I mean, over anybody.
I guess Eddie O's a win-now team because he took Datsuk in the 6th round, and if this is like a team going forward, you're talking a couple more years left for Datsuk. That's really it.
Yeah, no, I agree. He did, and he also took Hossa in the 4th round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Hossa for this 4th line, I should say.
That's a win-now team.
And Toronto is a win in the future team because it's Ekblad, Eichel, Larkin, Draisaitl, Seth Jones, Philip Forsberg. I mean, it's a lot of future. A lot. I mean, and they're all good now, but a lot of guys who are in their very early 20s or late teens.
Yeah.
You know what this tells me? This list. We always ask the question: who are the? Because we live in an era where I think there's a lot of really great goalies. Like we live in a great goalie era of hockey. I mean, there's more great goalies right now than there's ever been. And I guess it depends on how you define great or good.
I think there are more good goalies. I think there are 6 or 7 great goalies and about 15 to 16 good goalies.
That's possible, but I think that but when you look at goals against averages and save percentages and all this stuff, I mean these statistics are nuts compared to what they've been. And you can say that that's the game and all you want to, but when you start looking at every goalie, you start to have a common denominator here. This is every goalie. So, but what this list kind of shows is that these guys really saw 3 goalies that made a difference in my mind. And some of them went with the goalies much later in the really good goalies that we're talking about. But look at the top that I can see. Oh, maybe 4. I'll go with 4 goalies that were in the top 4 rounds.
Lundqvist, Price, Holtby,
and Quick.
And Quick.
Well, he was right after that.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you. I thought that Eddie Olczyk, kind of had it right. Even though I did like all the goalie selections they were taking, but he didn't take a goalie to like the 17th or 18th or 19th round.
You didn't have to.
And he got 2 guys who have won Stanley Cups, Crawford and Fleury.
You really didn't have to, because at that point, once you got past those goalies that everybody considered those are the game-changing goalies, there were plenty of good goalies out there, or good/great goalies out there. And you're right. And Crawford is phenomenal right now, and has been phenomenal.
Which is like in a football fantasy draft, you have that top echelon of quarterbacks, 5 or 6,
right.
And then most everybody will wait till the 5th or 6th round to get, because then most of those quarterbacks are all the same, or all pretty much interchangeable.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like, so looking at it, I guess the team that's most like that contains the most of its own original players, Kevin, is the Rangers, or is it?
I think so, but what I found interesting is Neil Smith had a scouting background. He took a lot of younger players. Kevin McLean had a coaching background. He took, star power, because he obviously never had anyone like Connor McDavid when he was, coaching or even as a GM. So Laidlaw took a big physical team because he was a physical player.
I did find another crazy pick. I did.
Go ahead. That's his crazy pick.
Eddie Olczyk, Vladimir Sobaka. Like, here's the thing, Eddie. I would take Ivan Provorov. I would take Travis Sanheim. I would take one of those young guys that's ready to be in the league in a year or 2 over that 28-year-old guy in the KHL. Even if he comes over, he's not going to be any better than Medvedev, who's been good, but he's not a game breaker. These other guys could be game breakers. That's a crazy pick.
Everybody had him on their list late in the thing. They were all interested in getting the extra guy who can come in and playoff series and stir the pot and create a little energy, that kind of thing. So
you have depth charts for these two, Kevin. You'll be posting, or?
Yeah, the depth chart. I think the depth chart just went up like an hour ago, where it has their line combinations,
good,
their defensive pairings, and
it
has their GM and their coach.
Good.
Very cool.
I just retweeted it, Ak. I just retweeted it.
Yeah, I cannot wait to to put these guys together in the NHL game and see what comes up and see what happens.
And interestingly, I just looked at the list of the first 20 picks for Toronto, and there's no Maple Leafs on that first 20.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, Ek, and this is what I have to ask you. You're now in the position of Shane Malloy, my radio co-host, because you're going to have to rank Ilya Kovalchuk. He's got 12 goals this year in 35 games in the KHL.
Well, there is a Kovalchuk. If I'm right on EA Sports, there's a Team Russia and there's a Kovalchuk on Team Russia. So I think I'm just gonna take him and move him over.
Yeah, but you've got to forward that. That's going off of last year where he had 25 goals.
And it's going off of him in the KHL. I mean, yeah, the question is like we've talked about before. I know that is a tricky spot. Like, we're going off of KHL statistics.
Goals this year. There's no way.
So let's talk for a second. Who in the NHL right now could I model a current Ilya Kovalchuk after?
That's fair.
Because that's what I like to do in this situation. I like to find a player. Okay, this is a similar type of player.
Rick Nash.
He really could be.
With the season Corey Perry's having, Corey Perry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about the same size, roughly.
He's Kovalchuk's 220, isn't he? 215. He's bigger.
Yeah, he's 230 now.
It's defensively similar. All those. I try to look at all those things.
He's listed at 230, Mike. I'm not making that up. That's.
Oh, I know. Too much borscht.
Hey, speaking of, I don't do NHL 16 or any of that stuff. Now, does it take into effect only statistics, or whether they're physical players? Like in other words,
it does. When Shane does it, he's got rankings for everything. There's speed, there's toughness, there's a lot of sliders.
Well, maybe we should find somebody who knows Shane who could do this.
He's not allowed to do it.
Because Shane does this professionally.
Yeah, they won't let him do it.
They won't let him do it. All right, well then he's not going to do it. No, he's not.
I just wondered whether or not they would take into obviously Laidlaw picked a team based on size and toughness. Like with that
toughness, there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of there's sliders in the game, but when they're ranking it, there's a lot of factors. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. We have to. Maybe we'll play around with it tomorrow a little bit. I'll come up with maybe Ilya Kovalchuk, and we'll look at it tomorrow a little bit. And see if I'm close. Because there's I'll start with the Kovalchuk they have, but there's definitely have to take into account everything that's going on.
Yeah, just lower the rankings by 20%.
Like Vladimir Sabaka, I probably would do Medvedev. That's an easy trade-off. Like that's the one I would do for Sabaka.
Honestly, if you wanted an energy forward who's in the NHL that's comparative to Sabotka, I would say Leo Komarov. He's got 15 goals. I mean, he's about the same age. I think it's comparable.
Is he a forward or a defenseman?
Sabotka's a forward, right?
Oh, he's a forward. Okay.
Real feisty, winger who creates havoc.
I'm going with St. Louis.
Okay, so, yeah, Komarov might be too many goals though, Mike.
Yeah, no, he might have been a better choice, but whatever. Yeah.
I was happy to see where Bobby Ryan went in this draft. I was kind of surprised by that a little bit.
I was surprised who took him.
Yeah.
I actually said to Laidlaw I was surprised that he would take Bobby Ryan.
Yeah, and going right before Dylan Larkin,
Yeah.
Well, the thing that Laidlaw doesn't know is Bobby Ryan is never going to play on the East Coast. He hates humidity. He's told me firsthand he is never coming back to the East Coast because he hates humidity.
Trade him to the Coyotes right now.
I'm just telling you that he's told me that more than once. So obviously it's a factor.
Hey, let's talk about the World Juniors and a few other things.
All right, real quick, we get into the World Juniors. And the one thing I wrote about the Byfuglien thing today was just, that I've been talking to a lot of people. It sounds like the Dustin Byfuglien sweepstakes is going to be afoot. Like it sounds like we're going to see a Dustin Byfuglien trade by the deadline, and that things are going to, and teams are starting to gear up. And the one team that I was kind of surprised at, but maybe not, because this is the one team that maybe can take a shot at him without having to worry about re-signing him to a degree, was the LA Kings. And they could be the one. They could be trying to get a shot in at him earlier than later. I was told to try to throw a big offer up there right in the forefront to try to grab him before things get silly with him.
Well, this is Andres Sekera all over again. I mean, they traded for him, and that wasn't before the deadline, too much before the deadline, but it was. But I mean. No,
I don't think so, because Dustin Byfuglien is he's a different.
I'm not comparing the two defense. I'm just saying the Kings went out and traded a first-round pick to get Sekera. They needed to fill that position.
Right.
They're doing the same thing this year. It's a rental guy. Winnipeg might have to retain a little bit of salary for him to fit or take a player back in the deal, but that makes sense in terms of the short-term rental that Dean Lombardi apparently likes to do.
Yeah.
Well, here's the other thing I would say. Just about this would be, and I don't know how this plays into it, but if I'm Kevin Cheveldayoff, I'm waiting till the very last minute because my job would seem to be on the line. I've got to try to make the playoffs. I mean, if he gives away Byfuglien in the type of deal that we're talking about, which is always a first round pick and a good prospect and a B prospect, that doesn't help him, and he was going to lose his job, it would seem to me. So
yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, and they'd have to make something. They'd have to have another plan to bring in a defenseman in another way to feel like and of course.
I think they could get like Derek Forbort and Adrian Kempe and a pick. I think they could get that out of LA. And Forbort's a really good defenseman. It just took him a little while to develop. But he just got his first goal the other day. He's not a real offensive player, don't get me wrong, but he's a really solid defensive player, and then Winnipeg could always use that.
Yeah, and the fact is that Winnipeg right now, they're 34 points. They're 8 points out of the wild card. They're 10 points out of one of the top 3 spots in the Central Division. Unless they turn it on like Ottawa did at the end of last year, they're not making the playoffs. Maybe the determination has to be made by the All-Star break, and if they're still this much out of the playoff picture, then Cheveldayoff knows that he has to get what he can get for Byfuglien right now.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to when we had Peter Tessier from Winnipeg on earlier in the year, and he really said something that was kind of striking, that he thought that there wasn't as much pressure to make the playoffs this year as people thought there was, in terms of the fact that they had made it already, that they knew that these two players, that they had to make good on these two players and make this work, and that they were sort of stuck in a rebuild, even if they didn't want to admit it, but they couldn't.
There's truth to that. I don't think his job is that much on the line. That's just my personal feeling. Kevin could be right, but I do think I think he has another year no matter what. I do.
And
you could be right too. I don't know the answer.
And we have 2 months until the deadline.
This has been a very patient ownership with Winnipeg. They really have.
It's not like they're losing money. They're making money hand over fist.
We have 2 months until the deadline, so a lot of things can filter out in that time.
I think you might still get a better return at the deadline than you do now, because a team taking him on now is taking on a lot of salary earlier than they necessarily have to, especially a team like the Kings, who are going to make the playoffs and they don't have to worry about this. So taking on that extra salary is not going to be a great thing for them to have to do. So
right now, the NHL landscape, there are not many teams well positioned to be sellers right now. If you look at the West, all these teams in the Pacific are within 5 points of a playoff spot. Even Anaheim is within range. In the East, the only 2 teams I see that are definite sellers are Carolina and Toronto.
Yeah, Mike's really right on that. I've spoken to several GMs who said that there's really very little going on in the trade market right now.
Yeah, there doesn't. This is incredible. There was an article that came out, I think Elliot Friedman mentioned it, about how hard Columbus has been trying to make a trade and unable to make a trade. Yep. And how it's really almost impossible to make a trade right now. So,
but the thing is, Zach, they have all players who have a year, 2 years, 3 years longer in terms of their contracts, and it's tough to trade those players when the uncertainty of what the salary cap is going to be. That's why I keep saying about Carolina and Toronto. Toronto's got like almost 10 UFA and RFA guys. Even though they're not, most of them are not great. Some of them would be roster fillers. I think, they're going to be able to charge a little more than people think for guys like P.A. Parento and Roman Polak, because there are just not that many people out there.
I completely agree with that. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's get into the World Juniors a little bit here. Right now, the U.S., of course, yesterday. You guys talked, I'm sure, about this, but it happened after your show yesterday.
No, it happened before. We talked about it. We railed about it.
Yeah. So the U.S.-Sweden game yesterday was incredible, and then today Canada beat Switzerland in a shootout.
Yeah, barely.
Barely after Switzerland had lost to Denmark, correct?
Yes.
This is the crazy. It's a lot of crazy stuff going on over there.
Well, here's my prediction, because this is the way it always works out. Is Canada is going to beat Sweden by a bunch of goals, so Canada will still end up with the number 1 seed, and the U.S. will end up third, even though because somehow Canada always wins the games that really get them a favorable setup. That's history. They seem to sense when they've really got to,
they find a way.
Yeah, and that's what I think will happen. Everybody was all in USA Hockey was all excited about the win over Canada, and the Canadians are going to figure a way to make render that it didn't really matter.
And
So
Sweden will be in the second of back-to-back games on New Year's Eve when they play Canada. And Sweden is going to probably hold out William Nylander until the quarterfinals because there's really no need. Once they beat Denmark, they're 3-0. They're guaranteed second place, and they're not going to risk Nylander. They're going to make sure he's got no concussion symptoms before they bring him back for the quarterfinal. So, I mean, Sweden right now they're either going to be first or second in Group A. Canada could be first or second in Group A. The U.S., depending on what they do in their final couple games, I mean, I think it's either going to be second or third. I mean,
you don't want to play Sweden. You don't want to play Finland. You don't want to play Russia in the first playoff game. You just don't. If you do, you're in trouble, no matter what team you are.
That to me, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't mind playing Sweden again. I mean, if the U.S. totally dominated Sweden. I mean,
yeah, but again, if they went 0 for 8, they could go 0 for 8 again. Like, I mean.
Yeah.
Well, they can't play them in the first round because they cross groups. So if the U.S. finished in third, they'd play either Finland or Russia.
Yeah, you don't want to play Finland or Russia. I mean, honestly, that should be the motivation, but we always mention that, and it always seems to happen. All that said, listen, Canada's defense, they gave up a lot of backdoor plays, and they really are not as good as everybody thought they were. So there's a little bit of an issue there for sure.
now I think there is a way still for the U.S. to get the top seed right now. If Canada wins by 1 goal over Sweden, then their goal differential would be -1 in those 3 games, right? And Sweden's would be 0, and USA's would be +1.
Right.
Yeah, right. So they could actually.
So that was the only positive of the Sweden game was the differential wasn't bad.
Right. So I mean, basically, if it's a 1-goal game, Canada's got to win by more than two goals in order to push USA down the third. So.
Right, and the first 2 spots in Group A probably get either the Slovaks or the Czechs, and that's not to say that's an easy game.
Well, it's a huge difference, yeah.
But it's a huge difference between them and the Russians and the Finns.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean the U.S. I mean, what's going on here, in your opinion, with the U.S. team? Russ and Kevin, start with Kevin real quick. What are your thoughts?
I just thought they had bad luck. They didn't score on the power play, and they should have won that game, and they didn't. But I was very impressed with the win over Canada simply because they were ahead 2-1. They gave up the tying goal 2-2, and I've seen enough of those Canada-U.S. games.
Yeah.
Generally, what happens at that point is as Canada finds the momentum and they win 4-2. But in that case, they didn't. The Americans actually had the momentum, and I thought the Americans looked like they were the confident team, and Canada didn't. So it was a different team. But then in that second game, they couldn't find that swagger to get that goal they needed on the power play. Sweden was a good team, but the U.S. should have won that game.
Yeah, I mean, Russ and I were saying yesterday on the webcast that the U.S. went 0 for 8 on the power play, and a player like Jeremy Bracco, who was left off the team, and Sonny Milano was on the second power play rather than being on the top power play. Those are things that you want to have your best offensive players or your most creative offensive players in those opportunities, and they didn't. I mean, don't get me wrong, they have a lot of creative players with Kachuk and with Matthews, but there were a lot of missed opportunities in that game against Sweden. I don't know whether that's going to come back to bite them.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that we have to. I mean, these are it's very chippy. It's gotten very, very chippy in the World Juniors. I mean, it usually is, but this particularly. I mean, we've seen lots of.
Well, the Swiss.
Yeah, the Swiss have been really chippy. Here's the thing too. 4th line for the U.S. What's the point? Honestly, what is the point? How much are they playing? You could have guys like Connor Garland, who's ripping up the queue. He's got 80 points. You could have Jeremy Bracco there, who was the 2nd leading scorer in the under-18s.
Yeah.
There's no reason he shouldn't be there. And anybody else, I mean, if you want to put one guy like Bork there because you like his penalty killing, fine, but a whole line of muckers makes no sense at this level for this kind of game. It doesn't.
Especially when you lose one of your top scorers to injury, and then you have to bring somebody up to fill that role, and that's what's happened, right? So they're stuck in this spot where they have to fill the role. But this is the U.S. way of doing things, right, Kevin? This is the way they do it. They do have this very distinctive line set up.
Yeah, no, that's right. And the Bracco thing was one everyone was talking about. But it sure seemed like they had enough offense. Like I didn't think that would be the issue. They had plenty of guys. Like their top line is guys that are all going to go in the first round of the NHL draft.
Well, they have a lot of guys. I mean, look, there's plenty of blame to go around. I mean, Matthews, you can't expect to be the leading scorer in this tournament, but you expect him to be a top guy. Guys like Brock Boeser. There's plenty of guys, but even Milano, he kept him on the second power play the whole time. Even Schmaltz didn't move up until the first power play until the seventh power play. And this is a guy who's very adept at the power play, great at moving the puck. The minute he moved up, at least the puck was moving around a lot better. There's moves like that were a bit puzzling to me, and at some point, like you go 0 for 5 in the power play, you got to do something. You've got a whole team of guys, the thing, my argument is, Kev, they haven't played enough games where they even have a set power play. They're only going by what they've seen in camp and a couple of games, so there's no reason not to juggle.
Yeah, and they could have used Noah Hannafin, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean.
No, I mean this is obvious, but they've had a lot of. I mean they did have a really good game against Sweden. I mean it's like they did just run into. I agree with Kevin to a degree here. There's a lot of bad luck in that game. I mean
there was, but here's the thing. Brandon Fortunato, like if you've got Del Pidio on that power play, take another defenseman off that power play, put another guy like Milano there who handles the puck just as well as the defenseman, but also has tremendous hands. I think maybe the best hands on that team, and do something like that. Fortunato is a nice offensive defenseman. He's no game breaker. And look, and Werenski is not a game breaking offensive defenseman. That's not his game. And so he's not going to, for people that might have thought he's going to put up a ton of points, he's not going to do that. He's just going to play great defense, put up some points, but be an effective defenseman, and that's what they want, the leader on the blue line. But they don't have like a game breaking offensive defenseman. And if you don't have that, to me, you got to put another forward on there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, it's amazing to me how much Werenski to me reminds. I mean, I've only seen a little bit of it, but how much he reminds me of Chelios. Like when I see him skate.
Yeah, he's a lot like him.
And that Chelios is actually coaching him is really cool. I mean, he really does have that Chelios thing about him, like the confidence. Not just beyond his skill, even the confidence to just look like he knows what he's doing all the time. And
Chelios made a big mistake in that game, though.
Yeah.
Mistake, because when Nedeljkovic was motioning over to the bench, should I go over? There was confusion, and then he got too many players, and that's on Chelios. That was bad. That killed the game, really.
Yeah, it killed their last shot at least.
It
yeah,
did.
No, that was for sure. Yeah, so that's all the time we have for today, guys. But we'll be back again tomorrow at a normal time, 1 o'clock tomorrow. Should be good for everybody, and we'll talk more, and we'll have more information about the draft. We'll have talk about line combinations and stuff like that too, because I love this top 6 thing. We'll be talking. Make sure you check out USA Today tomorrow or online now, for sure, because there's so much to do with this, and we'll be getting into it then. So, guys, enjoy your night without Buzz. It is just hockey. We'll talk to you soon.